Sleep has been one of my greatest battles for most of my life. I started to experience intermittent insomnia around ages probably 6, 7, or 8, really, really young. And that insomnia began to become chronic, where it would last for weeks or even months on end sometimes in early adolescence, around ages 13 or 14, lasting for the better part of 20 years. I finally got my sleep dialed in my early 30s, and I've made a few videos explaining how I did that. Two things really, really surprised me when that happened. The first is that it happened because I assumed for most of my life that my insomnia was permanent, and it turned out there were some things I needed to do differently to fix it. But what I was probably even more surprised by was that even when I started to get enough sleep, the improvements in my mood and energy and mental functioning were not as dramatic as I would have expected them to be. When I was struggling with insomnia, I was tired all the time, and I assumed that if I could somehow magically get enough sleep, that would fix all of that. And at least at first, that was not the case. I was getting a solid 7 to 8 hours of sleep most nights, other than really occasional, high stress nights, or if I had a sick kid or something. And yet I didn't feel as better as I had anticipated that I would. I did a little more research, did some kind of experiments in my own life, and found out there are a lot of factors that go into your energy level and your mental performance besides just the quantity of sleep that you get. Today, I'm going to review 12 reasons why you might still be tired even though you're getting plenty of sleep. And for each one, I'm going to identify a couple things you can do to fix it. The first possibility, and in my opinion, one of the most common, is that the exhaustion you feel during your day is psychological and not physical. We can be very, very tired even if our bodies are not having to work particularly hard throughout the day. And this is really critical to understand because sleep is much more resting for you physically than mentally. Sleep is necessary for your brain, but sleep in and of itself doesn't necessarily deal with your stress. And if you're chronically stressed out, that can be a huge part of why you're so tired all the time. Sleep isn't really a stress reliever because you are not conscious to enjoy it. And, it feels like when you finally fall asleep and you wake up, even if it was 8 hours, it feels like it was 3 seconds, right? And so you can go to bed stressed out and wake up stressed out because you didn't really get a break from the stress. You did, but you weren't experiencing it. The way we get a break from stress is by being awake and alert and engaged in things that are not terribly stressful. So if you just work really hard and you're just busy and stressed out all day long and get great sleep, you can still be chronically exhausted. What we need in order to rest mentally is regular engagement in activities that are high stimulation but low stress. Everyone's different here, so what kind of scratches that itch for you might be different than what it is for me. But a high stimulation activity is one that when you do it, you notice that you aren't really thinking about much else. It kind of takes most, if not all, of your brain. Things that you sort of lose yourself in or find your flow state in, and whatever was bothering you before, it kind of disappears or fades to the background for a while. Low stress just means you aren't worried about how well you're doing while you're engaging in this activity. It can be low stress because you don't really care about it. Like maybe it's just a fun little hobby and there's no, performance or social or financial implications to it. It could be low stress because you're just really good at it and you're very confident that you can do a good job. So even if it is something that matters to you, it might not be something that you're like really in your head about while you're doing. But that's what our brains need to rest. They need a break from the stress where we are awake and alert and engaged. So try to spend ideally at least 30 minutes of every 3 hours engaging in a high stimulation, low stress activity so that your brain isn't exhausted from constantly being under stress. A second reason, and it might seem similar to the first, but there are some fine distinctions here, is that you are chronically in survival mode. There are certain circumstances we can experience in life that keep us in a fight or flight state most, if not all of the day. And when you're in that fight or flight state, your body and your brain use resources differently. They burn through resources much more quickly. It's sort of like overclocking your PC or installing forced induction on an automotive engine, if you're familiar with those things. Basically, it makes your body and your brain run faster and run hotter, and so they need more resources, including time, to recharge from that. We can be chronically in survival mode, chronically in fight or flight for a lot of reasons. Acute life stressors could be a big one. So if you have a really demanding high performance job, like maybe you work in healthcare or in law or law enforcement, I mean, all of these would be jobs where like you are going to spend a lot of time in fight or flight because they're very high stress jobs. Maybe you're in a relationship that's very on the rocks and you're not feeling very secure in the relationship and it feels like you could end at any time if you make a mistake. That's going to put you in chronic fight or flight. There's a lot of situations like this. Maybe you live in a really unsafe neighborhood and so your life actually is potentially in danger. Maybe you go to a rough school or something like that. This one is a little bit harder to identify a solution for because some of these circumstances can be changed and some can't. But if you are experiencing something like this, just know that your need for resources is going to be higher. You're probably going to need more sleep. You're going to need more downtime because your body and your brain are using extra resources that they wouldn't otherwise use in comparable circumstances. The third reason you might be tired all the time is that your sleep quality is poor. So sleep, being rested after a night's sleep is an interaction between quantity and quality. And even if you're getting enough sleep, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting good sleep. We usually measure sleep by quantity just because it's easier to measure. When you wake up, you kind of know how long you slept, but you don't necessarily know how well you slept. And I know some of us have devices, may have a watch or something that sort of tracks your sleep. It's a rough estimate. The actual biomarker for the quality of sleep is brainwave activity. Your smartwatch obviously isn't measuring brainwaves. It's measuring, pulse, and it's kind of inferring from that. So it's not useless, but it's not really giving you the full picture. Quality sleep means that you're moving into deeper and lighter stages of sleep in a nice, linear, predictable way. There's a few things that can get in the way of your ability to do that. One is if you're having trouble breathing at night. That obviously can happen for a few reasons. Maybe you're like me and you have a deviated septum and chronic allergies and your nose is just always plugged and breathing through your mouth just doesn't, it's a little bit more labored. I personally use Breathe Right strips every night to make sure that I'm able to breathe okay. And Breathe Right is not a sponsor of this video. It can be store brand, whatever. I don't know how much of a difference it makes, but I make sure that I get enough oxygen at night. And that's something I have to do just because of my physiology to make sure that my body and brain get enough oxygen while I'm sleeping. If you have a condition like sleep apnea, you might have a CPAP machine. I know a lot of people don't like their CPAP machines. I was going to say I get it. That would be a little bit of a lie just because I've never had to wear one, but they do seem like they would be uncomfortable and unpleasant. I don't think I would like to wear one if I had one, but I like being tired even less. And so, if you have a condition that doesn't require you, but would be improved by using something like a CPAP machine, I would really strongly encourage you to use it. There can be substance-related reasons why our sleep quality is poor. So if you go to bed with caffeine in your system, with alcohol in your system, with marijuana in your system, all of these things actually impair your movement through the progression of your sleep cycles. Caffeine, of course, can also make it harder to fall asleep. Alcohol and marijuana don't necessarily do that. In fact, they may actually make it easier to fall asleep since they're sedating and relaxing, but they truncate your ability to reach deeper stages of sleep. And so even if your quantity of sleep is good, if you have those substances in your system while you're sleeping, your quality is still probably going to be pretty poor, and you might feel and function the following day as if you've gotten far less sleep than you actually did. Another one to watch out is diphenhydramine, which is the active ingredient in Benadryl, as well as a lot of over-the-counter sleep aids. Obviously, it does help you fall asleep, but it's actually even worse than alcohol and marijuana in terms of blocking your ability to reach those deeper stages of sleep, and you'll feel the next day as if you got about half as much sleep as you actually did. So try your best to stay away from any of those substances anywhere near your bedtime. Another factor that can impair the quality of your sleep is the environment in which you're sleeping. This is obviously a hugely complicated category. It includes a lot of variables like temperature, sound, light, how good your bed is, how good your pillow is. I know some of those are expensive and we're all in different financial circumstances, so I'm not saying everyone should go out and upgrade their bed, upgrade their pillow. If you can afford to do it, it's one of those investments that I think is always worth it because the quality of your sleep impacts everything. I mean, it impacts your relationships, your physical health, your ability to perform at work, at school. It's just critical. Like, we cannot overstate the importance of sleep. If you're in a situation where you don't have a lot of control over your sleep environment, and there are elements in your sleep environment that make it difficult for you to get quality sleep, like maybe you can't afford to improve some of those things, or you don't have total control over the environment. Maybe you sleep with a partner who has very different sleep needs than you. Maybe you're a teenager and you just kind of get whatever your parents give you. Another thing that can make a big difference in some of these things, especially sound and light conditions, is the use of a sleep mask. There are a lot of sleep masks out there. I have a preference for one in particular that I'll share with you in a second. But in general, a sleep mask is going to make your sleep environment like perform or function as if it were better than it actually was. So if you've got, a partner that snores or like needs a light on or something like that and you need it dark, or maybe they like to fall asleep with the TV on and that keeps you up, a sleep mask can be a great way to mitigate that. I personally use this one. This is the Manta Sleep Audio Mask. Manta Sleep makes a wide range of sleep mask products. This one's just my personal favorite. They are incredibly comfortable. That was the biggest thing I was skeptical of, is I was like, I don't think I want something on my face while I sleep. But I really do like it very dark and very quiet, and those can be difficult circumstances to achieve. So they sent me one for free. I tried it out, and I found that it was actually shockingly comfortable. I fell asleep no problem with it on, slept through it all night with it on, and I've been using it virtually every night ever since. The one I have also has Bluetooth. So it actually has a couple adjustable little speakers in it, and I'm able to put I use nature sounds personally. I can fall asleep to crickets or rain or like a bonfire. I have a whole long sleep playlist. Sometimes I even use very calming, relaxing music, although I have to be a little careful with that one because sometimes the music energizes me. That mask has definitely improved my sleep quality pretty dramatically, and I've noticed a difference in terms of how I feel the next day compared to how much I slept. 8 hours with my mask is definitely noticeably better than 8 hours without it. That and my Breathe Right strips, those are the two products I use every single night for sleep. I will leave a link below if you guys do want to check out Manta Sleep. They are a sponsor of today's video. I'm a huge fan of theirs, and I would definitely encourage you to take a look. The fourth reason you might be having trouble with your sleep quality or still feeling tired even if you're getting enough sleep is that there is too much variation in your sleep and wake times, meaning you fall asleep and wake up at pretty different times throughout the week or the month. Now that could be for a few reasons. I know some people have rotating work schedules. Maybe you work, again, in healthcare or in food service, and sometimes your work schedules change from one day to the next, so your sleep schedule changes as well. Some of us just stay up late and then we sleep in late on the weekends, so we functionally have our weekday schedule and our weekend schedule. So there can be all kinds of reasons for this, but we should avoid it as much as is humanly possible because rotating sleep schedules are really, really bad for us. When you fall asleep at night, you ideally, if you get 8 hours of sleep, you probably complete 4 sleep cycles. So that's when you go into deeper and then lighter sleep. But it's not like you might think, I bet each sleep cycle takes about 2 hours then since there's 4 of them. But that's actually not true. The first couple take quite a bit longer, closer to 2.5 hours each. And the third and fourth actually take less time because as you sleep throughout the night, your sleep efficiency increases. Your body gets a little better and faster at moving through those cycles. And so when you sleep and wake at different times, your body can't really dial in that circadian rhythm, and you actually end up needing more sleep to get the same amount of rest as you would if it was pretty close to the same time. You also are likely to have more trouble falling asleep and waking up because your body doesn't know when you're trying to do that. It doesn't necessarily understand the rotating schedule, so you're more likely to experience insomnia. You're also more likely to wake up from a deeper stage of sleep, and that's the days when you wake up and you're very groggy and disoriented and it takes you a long time to get going. So to the best of your ability, try to keep sleep and wake times as close to the same as possible every day. Now, I'm not the fun police. I know you have weekends, you probably want to go out and do things. I'm not saying that under no circumstances should you ever stay up, quote, past your bedtime. If you do, though, it is actually better to still stick with your wake time, like what it would be if it was a work day or a school day or whatever you have going on, and not let yourself sleep in. Because when you sleep in an hour or two, even just a couple days in a row, you are essentially jet lagging yourself. So think about if you travel 1 or 2 time zones away, that's what happens is you're functioning on a different schedule. And when you come back to your time zone, you feel a little bit off for a few days. That's jet lag. When you have a weekend schedule and a weekday schedule, if they're an hour or two apart, you're starting every Monday jet lagged. And it's no wonder the first part of your week is rough, because that's a miserable experience. On a similar note, the 5th reason why you might still be tired every day despite getting enough sleep is that your sleep is broken up into sections. What I mean by this is either you're waking up at night for a long period of time before going back to sleep, or maybe you're taking 1 or 2 long naps during the day and then sleeping for less time at night. This kind of has the same problem where it's like those 2 or 3 periods of sleep for you might add up to an acceptable quantity of sleep. But the problem you're going to run into is that sleep efficiency again, that you're having longer periods of sleep. It's going to extend the sleep cycles for longer. So if you're doing that, if you're taking naps or if you're up in the middle of the night, you actually are probably end up needing 9 or 10 hours of sleep to feel rested rather than 8. Sleep is best to do all at once if you can. So if you've fallen into one of these habits of either taking naps or being up in the middle of the night, try to condense all of that into one. You will function better on less sleep if it happens all at once. The 6th reason why you might still be tired is that you're passing out and not falling asleep. This does make a difference, and I don't just mean under the influence of substances. We covered that already. When I say passing out, what I mean is you're staying up so late that it's like physically painful to keep your eyes open. And when you finally get in bed or close your eyes and your head hits the pillow, you're falling asleep in minutes, like 5 minutes or less. That's actually not good. When that happens, you have waited to go to bed until the point where you are exhausted rather than tired. And you're actually missing part of your sleep cycle. When you're that tired that it like almost hurts a little bit, that's when your brain is wanting to be in deep sleep. So that means you probably should have been asleep like 45 minutes ago. And I'm willing to bet that if you went to bed much earlier, you actually would fall asleep much earlier. So you are undersleeping when you do this. Even if your sleep and wake times are consistent, you're probably missing a third, if not half, of your first sleep cycle. And so once again, we're back to a poor sleep quality issue with this pattern. The solution to this one is something that a lot of people resist, but it's one that's relatively simple. Go to bed when you feel tired rather than when you feel exhausted. And I think you probably know what the difference is between those two things. Spending 20 or 30 minutes in bed awake and gradually getting more tired as you fall asleep is actually healthy. It's normal. It's good for you. That's part of your sleep cycle, and that ensures that you don't miss any sleep. We tend to get into these habits where we try to optimize everything, whether it's because we're really busy with work, or maybe it's like the revenge bedtime procrastination thing where you've had a hard day and now you want to like squeeze every ounce of like downtime or pleasure into your day through gaming, watching TV, scrolling, whatever it is. So you do that as long as you physically can until you feel like you can't handle it anymore. It's just that you end up kind of trying to squeeze water from a stone when you do that, because part of the reason that day was hard might have been because you were exhausted because you waited too long to go to bed the night before, and you're never actually addressing the root cause, and you just end up needing more and more and more of this resource that becomes harder and harder to get because your days are getting busier and shrinking, and you're feeling more and more tired every day. The only way out of that cycle is go to bed earlier. The 7th reason you might still be tired all day long is that you are addicted to caffeine. Obviously, caffeine is a substance that is, in theory, under ideal circumstances, gives us more energy and helps us feel more motivated, more focused, more of a lot of things that are good, that are pleasant. The problem is caffeine is a drug, and like every drug, you build up a tolerance to it. And if you are a consistent caffeine consumer, caffeine goes from something that gives you extra energy and it gives you this nice little boost when you consume it to something you need to consume to maintain even a baseline average functional level of energy. And if your caffeine intake drops below the baseline, you actually start to withdraw from caffeine because the functioning of your brain has acutely changed and your energy level actually feels low without it. This is really easy to get into the habit of, and I know I talk about caffeine a lot. Ultimately, I don't want to come across as being overzealous about this. The ideal level of caffeine intake is something all of us have to determine for ourselves. I am not the caffeine police, although frankly, if I was, most of y'all would be in prison. But that's not the point. The point is, I'm not here to tell you what to do. You can make your own choices about this. But caffeine is like something that's generally treated as harmless or even good in our society. And it can be good, but that's not universally true. And that's especially not universally true for people who have mental health conditions like anxiety or depression for that matter. No, caffeine might seem like a nice counterpart to depression because it can help with the fatigue, it can help with the brain fog, it can help with the low motivation. But depression also tends to cause insomnia. And so if you stack caffeine on top of that, it can quickly become a game of diminishing or even negative net returns. If you feel that you have a problematic relationship with caffeine, just like with any other substance, there's two approaches you could take here. You could work on gradually decreasing your caffeine intake, one drink at a time or even half a drink at a time. Or you could say, I want to limit myself to 1 cup of coffee a day. And if you're currently at 4, you're going to feel like crap for a week or two. But it's important to remember that that's temporary. That's acute. That's not how you feel without caffeine. That's how you feel when you are withdrawing from caffeine. And if you can make it through that first week or two, maybe you even need to take a week off from work while you do this, and that's okay. If you can make it through, your body and your brain will eventually produce baseline levels of energy and motivation again that are, what they were pre-caffeine habit. That's what gets a lot of people hung up is they try to reduce or eliminate for a few days. They feel like absolute crap and they're like, oh, I guess I just need this now. This is just what it's like. That's just a hump you got to get over. And that's you withdrawing, not actually your baseline energy level. Hopefully that makes sense. The 8th reason why you might be tired all the time is that you have an unhealthy relationship with food. And this one can be bi-directional. Remember that calories, which is what all your food is made up of, is actually shorthand. It's an abbreviation for caloric energy. That's what your food is. It's caloric energy. And if you're sleeping great but eating poorly, you're not going to feel awesome. Eating and nutrition is something that our society has done a great job of massively overcomplicating and screwing up. And at least in terms of eating for your mental health, it's really not that complicated. It needs to be enough, but not too much. If your food intake overall is restrictive, if you're just not getting enough caloric energy, if you're like, I'm not a fan of counting calories, but it is good to have just a rough ballpark sense of what you're consuming a day. If your caloric intake is less than 1,500 calories a day, that's not enough. For almost anybody, that's not enough even for a sedentary person. And so your brain is basically running on like low battery mode all the time, and you're not going to feel great. The opposite is also true for different reasons. If you're in a pattern of overeating, that's not just like extra fuel. Your body actually, when you overeat, your body kind of panics a little bit because the strain that puts on your metabolic system, your inner processes that break down the caloric energy, is pretty immense. And so what your body does when there's like a large amount of food in your stomach is it mobilizes more blood flow to your metabolic system to work on breaking down this, high amount of food. And some of that blood flow gets taken away from your brain. So I'm sure you've noticed this. It's like the stereotypical, Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner thing, where after someone eats a large amount of food, they get very lethargic, very sluggish. They might even fall asleep or take a nap, which might be really out of character for them. It's because their brain is lacking blood flow. Like it's kind of a scary, disturbing thing, to be honest. So if you're in a pattern of overeating, you're also going to experience a lot of intermittent fatigue as a result of this. Plus, you're also probably going to get a big blood sugar crash when your body finally does finish metabolizing that food because it went from very high to very low. So you're going to get a couple waves of exhaustion and fatigue from that. If you're trying to eat for optimal mental health and brain functioning, generally speaking, what you're going to want to do is eat 3 meals a day with a decent ratio of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Cutting out any of those 3, I'm not a fan of, and it's probably not going to make you feel great, at least at first. And maybe 1 or 2 snacks in between. And ideally, your meals aren't more than 6 hours apart because that's about how long it takes for your body to break down a full nutritionally complex meal. If you're not eating in the way I just described, you're probably not going to feel great. And this is a relatively quick and easy solution to that. The 9th reason, kind of related to the 8th, is you may not be drinking enough water. Even mild dehydration can cause brain fog, it can cause fatigue, and it can generally make us feel like crap. The ideal amount of fluid intake in a day is about 64 ounces for a person. There's a few ways you can go about doing that. I know that my wife's strategy was to buy a 64-ounce water bottle, because then she doesn't have to get... See, I got my 25-ounce water bottle here. That's kind of an awkward conversion to 64, because it's like 2.25, and sometimes it's like 2 a.m., or not 2 a.m., thank goodness, 2 p.m., and I don't remember if I'm on my first or second bottle, so I don't really rigidly track it. I just try to generally pay attention to it. But if you have a container that basically tracks the fluid intake for you, that can be a great way to make sure that you get enough of this. If your current fluid intake is way off from 64 ounces, like if you're drinking like 1 cup, one glass of water a day on average, that's probably like 12, 16 ounces, feel free to build up to that in increments. You don't have to go from 16 to 64. You'll have to pee all the time if you do that. So there can be wisdom in using a stepwise approach here. But mild dehydration can absolutely impair cognitive functioning and make you feel drowsy and lethargic all the time. The 10th reason could be that you have a very sedentary lifestyle. In addition to rest and caloric energy, your brain also needs blood and oxygen. And although it gets those things from your heart and your lungs, regular physical activity improves the functioning of your heart and your lungs, and therefore improves the amount of blood and oxygen flow to the brain. It makes you feel more energized, more motivated, sharper, improves your memory, it improves your concentration. The amount of things it does just for your brain, even if we say forget about the body, obviously there's physical health benefits of physical exercise too, but if we're just talking about the brain, this is one of your most effective tools. And I know this one is kind of a catch-22 because like in the short term, being more physically active makes you more tired immediately after you do it, right? It's not like you go for a run and you're like, now I have tons of energy. You're like, now I'm wheezing and tired and kind of want to go back to bed. So it's like a short-term loss for a long-term gain here. Just like we talked about with sleep and with caffeine and with water, step up to this. If you're currently at 0, the ideal level of physical activity for brain health and for mental health would be 3 to 5 days a week, 20 to 40 minutes, moderate or zone 2 intensity, which means like you can feel it. You might have a light skin sweat, you're a little short of breath, but like you can still talk. You don't feel like you're dying. And any format, that's my favorite part. Assuming it meets those 3 parameters, do whatever the heck you want to do. It really doesn't make a difference. Just do what you find fun, or at least unfun if none of it sounds fun. You don't need to get wrapped up into some fad workout or something like that. Like literally anything. It just doesn't matter. Build up to that. Maybe 3, 4, 5 steps. You increase it a little bit at a time. Because if you try to go from 0 to 100 all at once, that's when you tend to, that has like that New Year's resolution effect where you do it gung-ho for a week or 2 and then you say this is too hard and you stop. Do it in increments so that it feels easy, but it's going to be really hard for you to feel good and have good cognitive performance and have a good mental energy level if you have a very sedentary lifestyle. There's just no way around that. The 11th reason is that you may have a medical condition. Now, I'm not that kind of doctor, so this obviously is not my zone here, but I do know that there are many medical conditions that can cause chronic fatigue. Hormonal imbalances, thyroid issues, anemia, just to name a few. If you've tried like all 10 of the things I've talked about so far, and it's just not feeling any better, it might be worth talking to your doctor. It might be worth having some labs done, having some blood work done, having some panels, just making sure your levels of everything are where they should be. There might be something going on that you can't fix just by like doing these things. There might be something that requires medical intervention or a medication or a very specific targeted plan. So if you feel like you've tried everything, like all of my, behavioral ideas, and it's just not going away, might be worth talking to your doctor. And if even that fails, you might be in my 12th scenario, which is that you may be in a season of life where some level of exhaustion is just unavoidable. There are all kinds of reasons this can happen. You have young kids, babies, like you're probably going to be tired. Maybe you are a caregiver for an aging or ailing parent or family member. You're probably going to be tired. Maybe you're trying to further your career, so you're working full time because you have to, but you're also taking evening classes to try to get that master's degree or that bachelor's degree to eventually get out of this job that you don't really like. You're probably going to be tired. Maybe you have a spouse or a partner or a loved one with an intermittent chronic illness, and some days they can't do anything and your workload doubles. You're probably going to be tired. Sometimes there's just nothing we can do about it. Sometimes it's just life, and it's just the circumstances that we face, and it's not anything that you're doing wrong, and it's just a reality of what you're up against. So if that's you, what I'm saying probably doesn't make you feel any better. There's not necessarily a solution to any of that other than just acknowledging, like, I think this is unavoidable. And that means I'm not doing anything wrong. You know, I don't have a lifestyle problem. I'm not making some mistake. It's just, this is my ceiling right now. This is unavoidable, and this is just where I'm at. That has been me more than once. And it's just important not to like pressure yourself or be hard on yourself if that's the reason, and just know this is just where I'm at right now. Hopefully this content was valuable to you. A little bit longer than my usual content. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much, but it was a lot of information. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.